Good afternoon, Michael Malice here. Let that be a welcome for the next hour. We have with us a very special returning guest, one of my very dear friends, and someone I love bantering with, and I love hearing his insights. Conservative pundit and co-host of the Clay Travis and Buck Sexton show. Buck Sexton, Buck, thank you so much for coming back to the show. I got a very a nice question to open with. You recently became a dad, and
Yeah.
every person I know who becomes a parent, it immediately has an effect on their politics. Because right away they're like, okay, this isn't hypothetical. There's this little thing which is just peeing and pooping for now, and it's my job to make sure that I keep this little creature as innocent and safe as possible. Like, did it affect your work like instantly?
Yes, absolutely. Great to see you, man. I always appreciate when you ask me to come hang. You're great, and your audience is really funny. I like them, and even when they make fun of me, which is great, because they're clever. Like making fun of somebody when you're clever is always good, right? Your audience is full of clever people. But I would just on the dad thing, and I mean, I shared this on Twitter, and I really meant it, and I said this. I'm like, I know the dads already know this, but there's something that is a real mindset shift. It's profound. It's not specific to me or my experience. I know, and I'm sure a lot of moms feel this way too, but I'm speaking from the dad, speaking from the dad perspective. And it is, you have this little person who is not even totally aware of you being there, right? I mean,
Yeah,
let's,
yeah.
is like at a cognition level. And you're like, I would, if somebody's like, it's you or the kid, there's a train coming, like I'm jumping in the way of the train, like you would, and that's on some level irrational, but also the basis of human civilization. And I think that gets to your question, right? Which is, when you become a dad, and I had been waiting to do this for a long time. I always knew I wanted to be a dad. But I just being honest, in media, like I also didn't want to be on like wife number 3 by the time I was, making my way here. So I wanted to be very sure, and I found a wonderful woman to be my wife. But you unimportant things, I think, in day to day are even easier to just be like that's noise, that's nothing.
Right.
But the future, and the future you leave for your children, and your role in that future becomes even more important. So there is this profound mindset shift that I think does, and every parent I've talked to feels the same way,
Right.
right? It's not like, oh, this is Buck's revelation, like, but
Right, yeah.
but until you experience it, you haven't experienced it, and I just did, and I love being a dad. The only thing I'm a little preachy about is I want to tell all the guys out there who are, in their 20s and into their 30s, who are, going out, and you're not even going to remember, no matter how hot that chick is, no matter, what professional sports team she may have been a cheerleader for, making out with her or whatever, like you're not really going to remember that. So don't put off being a dad for too long. That's my best advice. Like, don't
That's
wait too long to get into these
that's
things.
true, because when you talk to anyone talks to elderly people, right? If you sat down with someone who's like 80, you don't ask them who's the hottest piece you had. You ask them, okay, how'd you meet mom? Or this, or maybe the broader stories like, okay, were you like a stud? And they'll have a bunch of stories, but they don't. That's not something you remember in your old age.
Yeah. Who's your friend? Not that you're incredibly handsome, but your very handsome podcast friend who's also down there in Texas, British guy. You know
Chris
what I mean? Like,
Williamson.
yeah, Chris Williamson. Yeah, I just blanked on his name for a second. I've talked to him before. He said something on one of his shows I thought was really meaningful. Well, actually, I think he was relaying what another guy, a guest, was telling him. But anyway, and it's a guest who did all these podcasts on like the greatest Titan CEO types, the big
Sure.
CEOs, and just basically to a man, the interviews with these different people and the books written about these different people say that they're all of them wish pretty much that they had spent more time with their family, and none
Oh
of
yeah.
them are like, I wish I had worked more. So
It's
there's something in that.
I've talked to Tom Bilyeu, who is co-founder of Quest, and who's like worth I think 9 figures. It's not a secret that he has worth that much money, and other people of that ilk. And I asked them, at what point does money lose its utility? And it's actually pretty low. Like once you have a mansion, you can go on trips whenever you want, eat out at dinner, buy nice clothes. It's not that much money as people would think. It's certainly not 100 million. And at that point, it's like, what is the benefit of me making another 40 million as opposed to this time with my son or my daughter, which I will not be able to get back at any price. And as anyone who's a parent knows, like once they hit teenagers, they're a lot less cute, and it's going to be a lot more of a problem. There's going to be that window where it's like, can we go back to you being 8 again?
Yeah, and the I think the thing that I remember, there are a few things I remember from Jordan Peterson. And look, I also I think that not that Jordan has a lot of detractors or anything, but I don't follow his career that closely. I know there's some people that are kind of going back and forth with him publicly and some on some
Sure.
other things. I feel like, especially when we're talking about people roughly speaking on our own team, we can cite, like, people can have really good insights, and I don't have to agree with them on everything. Like,
Sure.
our side is starting to do a little more. When I say our side, I don't mean you're like, I don't even know, you're an anarchist, right? So I don't know
Right.
what side exactly that constitutes, but you're on your own island. But those of us who would say we're conservatives or right of center, I think there's a little bit of the purity stuff going on that is can be kind of annoying a little bit, because we've never been in charge before, and it feels like we're in charge now.
Let's
And I
talk
think
about
there's some.
this. This is, I didn't think we
Oh,
were going to talk about
sure.
this. Let's talk about this. Okay. Because
But
this is what I
yeah,
think.
let's talk about. I just want to say, though, on the Peterson thing, he says the first 4 years of your kid's life go by in an instant. So
Yeah.
just like enjoy every second of it. And I've had a baby for 5 weeks, and I'm already like, I can't believe it's been 5 weeks. Right? Maybe
Yeah.
that's the lack of sleep, but it does just feel like, oh my gosh, he's getting bigger every day, and all that stuff you hear from your parents, and you're like, it's also true, right? It's
What,
all reality.
before we get
So
into the Peterson stuff, the last question I have but for you in this context is the internet is a very malevolent place, and we all have to experience it. Anybody who has a public platform has to deal with it. Was there a part of you that was? What was your decision matrix in terms of putting your baby's pictures on social media and things like this? Because I'm sure that was something you didn't decide lightly.
yeah, I mean, I think, there's only so much that you can control in life, period. And I think that there's a part of me that doesn't want to give up because of the incredibly dark and malevolent, really demonic forces that you're talking about. There are some things where demonic is truly the accurate description, and the sort of demonic reality that you're talking about there. I don't think that for those of us who feel like we're fighting, the demons in a whole lot of ways all the time. I don't think that should stop us from feeling like we can share photos of our children, especially at that age when they're babies. Like, I actually think it can be more for very different reasons. But do people want photos of them when they're 10, 11, 12, and kind of awkward? Like, when I wanted a lot of photos shared of me at that age, again, just for like personal branding reasons, nothing to do with what you're talking about or the concern you raised. But babies are babies, and there's millions of baby photos online, and I just feel like we're not. I don't think we can let the demons win by doing the thing where people put the. It's just my personal choice. I'm not disparaging anyone who chooses otherwise, but I'm not going to sort of live in the fear of what could happen and put smiley faces on my baby all the time. I mean, I just
Yeah.
sort of decided, like, that's letting the terrorists win.
This it's interesting you say this about the demons because I had this argument with Brett Weinstein over the weekend. We had a dinner together and we're talking about Christianity, and I said one of the reasons I'm not a Christian, and again, it's not for me. I'm not saying it's wrong for anybody else. People hear this, they think I'm saying other people shouldn't do it. One of the things I have an issue with is the idea of universalism and the idea that we're all equally capable of just committing pretty much any sin, thereby for the grace of God go on. And the example I use is like, okay, if you and I sat down, I'm like, hey, Buck, would you steal like $1 million from a corporation if no one ever knew about it? Okay, maybe. What if it's $1 million and that money has to be used for orphans and making their lives better? Okay, let's talk about that. If you could kill a certain person and get away with it, would you do it? Well, there's some really bad people out there. Let's think about this. But then if I say, if I put you in a room with a child and do whatever you wanted to it, would you do it? Right away, it's not like you don't think about it. You're like, what's wrong with me for even asking that question? So I think there's certain types of evil that murder, I can get there, robbing, I can get there. There's certain types of evil where it's like if it's presented to you, there's no circumstances where this is interesting, tantalizing, compelling. And that is something I disagree with.
I What's the part of it that you disagree with, just so I understand? You
Because this
disagree.
idea that we're all sinners and basically any of us can do any
Oh,
sin,
anyone's capable of anything. Yeah, no,
I don't think I'm
I
capable of that.
completely, I'm actually on you. I'm on your side of this argument. I just want to be clear, um, because I mean, I think a moral person would rather be dead than do real harm to a child.
Right? Like
Like,
what am
and
I
there's not
gaining
a lot of
here?
things where you'd say I would, but truly not in it. I would rather not be alive than commit that sort of harm to a child. And I think that is, I think that's a moral position, and I think it's a position that moral people would have on that issue. But yeah, to what you're saying about like stealing from a corporation, it's like I don't know. I mean, is it MSNBC? Like, which corporation are we
Right.
talking about? That's a
So
very different deal.
so I do agree with Christianity in that we all have that, the line of evil runs through every heart, and we're all capable of doing certain awful things, even though we never would in normal circumstance. I agree with that, and that anyone who says otherwise thinks delusional.
It was weird because it was actually in the New York Times, and I want to say it was, I can't remember these things now, maybe 15 years ago, maybe 20 years ago. It was a long time ago, but there was a whole piece, and it was drawing upon the interactions that state, you know, paid psychiatrists basically had with the criminal psychiatric population, and how they found themselves in their clinical diagnosis increasingly talking about evil.
Yeah. Right.
And
Yeah.
this was very uncomfortable for them because they would say, oh no, we're looking for the, well no, actually this kid, this guy, wasn't abused as a kid. We don't have any of these markers. No,
Right.
no, he doesn't show any indicators of like a chemical imbalance per se. Like, he's just an evil piece of shit. Like,
Right.
that's
Right.
real. And I think, and if you believe in the goodness of humanity, and if you believe in everlasting life, you believe in these things, I do think you also have to take in the duality of people can really choose evil, and that is what, and it's not some it's not some thing that people say to scare the church lady to put more money in the collection box. It's real. And for prison, basically it was like prison, psychiatrists, for prison psychiatrists be like, look, some guys are just evil, and I've seen it, and I've dealt with it, and this is what they do. And I'm pretty sure it was the New York Times. It was fascinating, but I think that that's real. And I think people should be the same way, by the way, that when people talk about exorcisms, and Sean Ryan's a friend, and he had a really interesting episode with a priest who performs exorcisms. I'm just like, yeah. I mean, I know you said you're not a Christian, but if you're a believing Christian, like you should think this stuff is very real. I
It's
mean, you
interesting because
should see this as real.
my friend who was at the dinner, she goes, "I agree with you broadly speaking, but I think there are some cases where it's not a person, it's like demonic activity." So when you hear things like people harming children, blah blah, but I also feel like that's just kind of pushing. Again, these are kind of fun, theological discussions we could have, and I'm sure in the comments, people who are Christians are going to say I'm misunderstanding it, which is certainly a prerogative. But that is something that it was just an interesting discussion to have. And the thing I do appreciate about Christians in America, especially people like take it seriously, go to church, and try to live a godly manner, is that they understand better than secular people that not only is evil real, it's really common. It's not something you got to go look forward to. There's a lot of it out there, and it's not going to be horns and sulfur. It's going to be some little bureaucrat who just won't give your mom the medicine she needs just because they get off and have that little bit of power.
Yes. Well, this is also why, and you and I think really, in a lot of ways, bonded over the whole COVID experience, where it was very clear to me that
Oh,
there were
yeah.
people who, and I actually remember I told very early on, because people even forget this now, and I'm not gonna, I know I could sit here. The problem with me with COVID is it's like talking to somebody who was like a great high school quarterback or something about the big game, is that I'll just go there, man. Like, I'm like, let's go, like, let's talk COVID. Like, I love it, because I'll
Wait,
never gonna
wait.
forget what
You've been a
happened.
dad for 5 weeks and already you're Al Bundy?
Oh, 100%. Like, I go full Al Bundy on the COVID stuff. If anyone wants to talk about it, I'll talk about it all day. I'm still pissed off at every airline stewardess who's like, put your mask up. I'm like, what timer are we working on here, lady? This is, the whole thing was so stupid. But I remember it was actually Ann Coulter at a dinner where everybody had to be masked walking to the tables. And I was like, this is the dumbest thing in the world, isn't it? And I want to say like June of 2020. So really early. And conservatives had been telling themselves, oh my gosh, the way Biden's going to win. No one even remembers this, but you'll see this. The way Biden's going to win is by saying, I'm going to open everything up again, and everything
Right.
is, I'm
That's
going to
right.
make all this stuff go away.
Right. That's
And
right.
I said to Ann at the time and to other people, I said, no, 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 no. they love this.
Yes. Oh, yes.
They love this. They want to keep doing this. They want, it goes to the core of who they are and the
Yes.
power they
Yes.
can wield. And sure enough, as we saw, like it only got worse from there when Biden won. So anyway, yeah, no, there's definitely real evil in the world, and people taking pleasure in other people's pain is one of the most unsettling things that exists, and for good reason, right? Because I always feel like that's a real litmus test, real sadist. And I just finished I know you had a great book about North Korean Kim Jong
Ill.
not ill,
Ill.
right? Not ill.
No,
I'm
my
forgetting
book's
now.
about ill.
Ill, yeah. I just finished Mao,
Oh,
the Untold Story.
yeah.
He might be the most sadistic son of a gun in like ever. Actually, I mean, and people should sadism is the only way to explain a lot of what he did. I know a lot of it was
No, it's
in order
explicitly
to.
sadistic.
That's what I mean. Like he was like, no, I'm doing this because it's fun and I can.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
but it's also good to like torture these people. Like they need torturing. It's not just like, oh, not like, oh, it's a cultural war. This price we got to pay. It's like, no, 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 no. Like they ate the rich. People in America, we're not taught like Mao in America. They literally chopped up rich people and ate them.
The lack of knowledge the general public it's funny, isn't it? Because we talk about um, China a lot in like the news discourse. Everyone's like China, Taiwan, China, Taiwan. Is it going to be China trade, China tariffs? The founder of modern China may be the most evil human being to have ever lived, ever. And
Pol
in
Pot's
terms of
worse.
both, you think Pol Pot's worse?
It was a third of the population in 4 years.
Higher percentage, but if you're looking at aggregate numbers, 40
I'm
to
not looking
60
at aggregate
million.
numbers. Hey, do you not know what per capita is, Buck Sexton?
No, I do know what per capita is. That's what I'm saying. But I mean, Pol Pot was a little stooge of Mao. And
Yeah,
this is
but
the other part of it, that Mao was
sure.
initially a stooge of Stalin, which no one ever
Right.
talks about. And then Pol Pot was a stooge of Mao, and so was Ho Chi Minh. And there was just none of this stuff gets skipped over in school entirely. 40 to 60 million people died under Maoism explicitly because of government policy. Their own
But
people.
also to be clear, this wasn't oops. This was a lot of them were targeted for
Yes, no, you
extermination.
should die. You should
That.
die. The
Yeah,
government's
yeah.
like, you should die. That's going to make things better for us. And it's and people didn't even really know. I think at the time, certainly at the time, but even still to this day, Mao was basically like, look, if we have to have a nuclear war, we lose half of our people, half of China's people. Worth it as long as we come out on top.
But I mean, he's got the numbers. Yeah.
Jun Chang, and I'm trying to remember the other guy. I actually have it. John Holiday, I think it is Holiday. Mao: The Untold Story is the book, and I just finished it like a couple months ago, and I just was anyway. The thing about sadism and evil, that guy is the height of evil. So you wanted to talk about right wing people attacking other people who are on the right. Where do you want to go?
Before we get into that, I just want to say more point about Mao. I think people, which has, whenever I write like a book about the Soviet Union, or look at North Korea, people always try to domesticate and be like, all right, who are the Republicans, who are the Democrats? Like it doesn't parse out that way. But the thing about Maoism, and a lot of conservatives suck. Everyone's a communist. Whoever they don't like is a communist. I'm like, Biden's not a communist. He's a corporate party hack. Like he's not a Marxist. He doesn't have this kind of philosophy to his brain. So
he's actually a dementia patient, as we know.
Right, sure. Right. But the parallels to Maoism do exist in specifically the Cultural Revolution. So the Cultural Revolution is not taught here. And when you hear about it, because you think China is very traditionalist, old school, reverence for the elderly. That's something very much a part of East Asian cultures, that we don't have here as much, and which something we can admire, I think from them, like respecting those who came before us and making sure their final days are treated, with reverence. But the Cultural Revolution is the college kids were encouraged to become these violent revolutionaries and basically beat up and like destroy the elderly. Like we're starting.
There were. I mean, this they go into some detail of this in the book, and they even grammar school age kids beating to death their own teachers on stage in front of crowds. Right. Kids who are like 10 years old. You're like, how can that happen? If you're tied up and you've got 20 10-year-olds who are all like poking you with sticks and kicking you, like they can kill you. Right. And that's what they would do.
Right. So that is, I think, where we do have parallels here with the universities, I think it's very much by design. It's Maoist in nature. This idea of radicalizing the youth to levels which middle America, it never enters their head because they don't
Well,
think
this
in
is
these
also why
terms.
I'm a fan of, and people get into like, but should we and what will they? And I'm no, I don't want to hear about what will they or anything else. Anything Trump can do to go after, I believe the cathedral is a term that I learned from you even on this show, which I agree with. Anything go after the university as their cathedral, like whatever you can do, whatever you can do. Are these places are factories of the most poisonous and destructive ideologies in America. And if you can make Harvard and Brown and UPenn and you name it beg for mercy, Trump, go for it. Go for it. These places, and people go, what about educating the they're not educating anybody. That's all a scam. This whole thing, this whole another thing I agree with you on. This is the truth because I have a little nephew now, and obviously I have a son. And see, Mike, you have to tell me where you want to go, or else I'm just going to run wild over here. Like the
That's
poofy haired bandit is
this is
is
not
just gonna do
CNN.
his
This is a
thing.
podcast. These are organic conversations.
That's true. That's true. Because you used to say like schools are prisons for children. And I was like, come
Yeah.
on, Malice, like you're being Malice. Come on.
Wait, can I interrupt you?
Um,
But you literally thought that was just me being like a blowhard or whatever the term would be?
Not a
Like, is
blowhard, but I think at the time, and let me just say, I think I was wrong. I think at the time I thought you were being just kind of provocative for
oh,
getting into. No, it's these like when you think about this system we have, and there's all these videos too that you see of like kids that are getting the crap kicked out of them by other kids, and
yeah,
by the way, nothing is going to happen. Like this is what people don't even understand. The kid that's like smashing, and the 15-year-old that's smashing another 15-year-old's face into like the side of the porcelain sink at PS whatever,
right,
nothing's gonna happen to him.
right.
There's no punishment, there's no justice or whatever. And now that kid has to this stuff. The whole idea that we're like throwing all these kids together because they live, or not even necessarily because of the way they've manipulated it, but generally speaking because they live in the same rough area, and and then we're just gonna put them in school from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. This whole thing is insane. Well,
Well,
why I remember being up at like 5 o'clock in the morning to do sports practice when I was in high school for different sports I was playing on. And then I would finish school at like 5 o'clock and then we'd have games. I get home at 9 o'clock at night. I was just tired for 4 years. And the whole thing just seemed to me like it wasn't actually geared toward, and it was true in grammar school too, it wasn't actually geared toward what's best for the kid. It's just a daycare program managed by the state under the rubric of education.
folks, weather's heating up. If you're like me and sometimes wake up too hot or too cold, then Miracle Made sheets are for you. Inspired by NASA technology, these sheets use silver-infused fabrics that regulate your body temperature all night long, keeps you perfectly cool and comfortable no matter the season. Plus, traditional sheets have more bacteria than a toilet seat. They give you acne, allergies, odors. Miracle Made's antibacterial silver fabric prevents up to 99.7% of bacterial growth, so your sheets stay fresher and cleaner 3 times longer, meaning less laundry and no more gross smells. Yeah, this really is tailored to my audience. Sleeping on Miracle Made sheets is like upgrading to a 5-star hotel without the price tag. They're incredibly soft and breathable. You don't wake up sweaty or uncomfortable. If you want better sleep, cleaner bedding, and less hassle, Miracle Made sheets are the way to go. So upgrade your sleep as the weather heats up. Go to trymiracle.com/malice to try Miracle Made sheets today. And if you're buying them for yourself or as a gift for a loved one or someone you don't love, if you order today, you can save over 40%. And if you use our promo code MALICE at checkout, you get a free 3-piece towel set and save another 20%. And this is great. Miracle is so confident in their product, you got a 30-day money-back guarantee. If you're not 100% satisfied, full refund. Upgrade your sleep with Miracle Made. Go to trymiracle.com/malice. Use code MALICE. Get your free 3-piece towel set. Save over 40% off. Again, that's trymiracle.com/malice to treat yourself. And thank you, Miracle Made, for sponsoring this episode. Let's get back to the show. So I'm going to get you even angrier. So I had a guy on the show. His book was author called Why Meadow Died. Meadow was his daughter who was shot at Marjorie Stillman Douglas High, whatever it's called, in Florida, that David Hogg got his name out of. And the perpetrator, and I'm blanking on the kid's name, would basically openly talk about, I'm going to shoot at the school. He would like grab girls or
I remember, yeah.
ways, like all sorts of things that in no context are acceptable. But they had a program in place because they wanted to prevent the school to prison pipeline. So basically their concern isn't like justice with the blindfold. Okay, who was right, who was wrong? It's like we got to make sure every child matters. So we have to make sure, this is very leftist commie ideology. We have to make sure every opportunity is afforded before this kid gets in trouble. And the people who pay the price for that are always the decent, well-being people who are the kind of kids and later adults you want in your community as your neighbors and as your coworkers, so forth, so forth. So, oh God,
You know,
okay. So, one
that's
second. So,
that's the critical. Oh, sorry.
I was just gonna say, so as a result of this and all these, they're not even red flags. It's just like everything. Um, he went and just shot the school just like he was telling them he was going to do, and it was entirely preventable and a function of, well, we don't want to put this kid in jail just yet or juvie.
Yes. Yes. Well, this is the fundamental realization that I think people who have wisdom, which is really the thing that is most lacking on the left. There are very high IQ people on the left, obviously.
Yes,
There can be very successful and successful professionally high IQ people. In fact, maybe there's even per capita more than we have on the right. I mean, who knows? But they, as an ideology, essentially lack wisdom because they reject the past in favor of an imaginary future, right? So
right.
the wisdom that we have gained from all of human history in dealing with public safety is, if you don't do things to protect the good people, bad things happen to them. And the root of disorder, chaos, and anarchy is we can't do anything to the bad people because that's mean.
Right.
If you can't do, if the state can't do anything, well, I don't want to get into that discussion, but if society can't do anything to the bad people, it's not like you're just avoiding harm. You're just displacing that harm onto people that don't deserve it. And this is the reality of what we saw in New York and all the stuff with depolicing and ending mass incarceration and, defunding police, all that crap. It is insane, but it is a belief that is founded in the feel-goodism of the left-wing imaginary future that we're going to have. And people that understand, abolishing prisons was always actually a part of it as well.
Oh yeah,
Like
Angela
when they
Davis
say,
talked about this since the late '60s. Yeah.
yeah, this is, it's not like they just want to have a slightly lower prison population or something. No. The game
Wait,
is like abolish the whole
let's
thing.
talk about this because this also has its roots in anarchism in the 1800s and early 1900s. And I read Alexander Berkman, who's one of the big names in anarchism. Emma Goldman, his partner in Literal Crime, she's on the cover of the White Pill right there. And he had a book called The ABC of Revolutionary of Anarchism. And prisons. Okay, if you're going to abolish everything, abolishing government, you got to abolish prisons. I'm like, okay, what's this guy going to say about it? I was very, very curious. And his point was, most people commit crime because of inequality, because they're broke. Like, look, if I'm working 14 hours a day and I can't put food on the table, I'm going to steal bread to feed my family. So once you overthrow capitalism, there'll be bread for everyone. Most of those people won't commit crimes. I'm like, okay, great. Let's assume that's true.
I
What
mean,
about the other one?
I'm already jumping out of my seat on that assumption, but sure, go ahead.
First of all, I think it's ridiculous that most crimes are economic. I don't think that's true at
They're
all.
not. Right,
Let's assume that's true. Like, I don't know how I'm broke, so I'm going to start raping people. Makes sense to them. Fine. What about the other ones? Like, what do you do with someone? Let's be as steel manny as possible. Someone got hit by lightning. They've got brain damage, and now they're just violent, complete personality change. What do you do with him? You got to put him somewhere. And if you're going to say mental hospital, that's just a prison. You just call, if you're locked in the mental hospital,
right.
it's just a prison with a nicer name. Right.
Yeah.
So they don't have an answer for that.
I mean, no, they don't have. Well, the answer is to let the rest of the population suffer. I mean, one of the things that I find particularly loathsome about the modern, Democrat or the contemporary Democrat perspective on crime is that it is overwhelmingly. People will say it's the "not in my backyard" phenomenon, but it's overwhelmingly it's a luxury belief that people who don't think they'll be affected by the bad outcomes they're advocating for like to promote because it gives them social status and it makes them feel good about themselves, but they don't bear the consequences other people do. And that's certainly the case with the wealthy in places like New York and San Francisco. And it's only what the one thing that I'll say that I underestimated and didn't really see, because I was in New York when it was terrible. Did you grow up? You grew up in the city too, right? Were you there in like the early 90s?
Yeah, but We weren't there when it was
Is that
terrible,
yeah?
which was the 70s.
No, the worst. See, this is interesting. A point of interesting for your audience. The highest murder rate that New York City ever had was 1990, 1991. It was about 2,200 murders. The worst it ever was in
But
the history of New York City.
but
Um,
hold on, but maybe the murder rate was higher, but the other crimes might have been higher. Because in the 70s, there was just this
well,
sense of
this
hopelessness.
there was. I know there's a
We're
lot of like
replacing
Death
semantics,
Wish,
maybe.
the movie, and just
Yeah,
yeah,
right,
yeah. Well, I mean, but you know, you have to remember murder. The thing about murders versus the other crime is the other stuff you get into a lot of like what's reported, what's not. You reach a certain
right,
threshold.
right.
The most interesting thing that I ever heard from an ambassador who usually don't have shit to say that's worth hearing, but was the U.S. ambassador to Mexico, who I interviewed many years ago. And I can't remember if he said it on air or off air to me, but I never forgot this. We were just talking about something with like the cartels, or I was getting into that stuff. And he said, Do you know what the prosecution to incarceration rate is according to the Mexican government's own internal numbers for serious crimes in that country? 3%.
No.
So if you commit the equivalent of like a felony in Mexico, the chance you're actually going to serve time for it, they think, is something like 3%. Now there are, and I don't want to get people are going to be like, I studied abroad in Mexico City and it's as safer than Boston. Yeah. Then they have to go down like, to the center of the country and along the coast where there's gang war every day over who controls the port and,
Right.
all that stuff. My point merely is there are some places where there's so much crime that like there's no, you can't really report on the crimes, and
Right.
so murder is the only reliable statistic because people are going to know about a murder. Like there's a body, people are upset, but property crime and all that stuff can get just consumed in the like vortex of criminality and violence. But anyway, back to New York City. In the 90s, it was just horrible. Whether it was worse in the 70s, somebody else who crunches the numbers can tell us. 90s is horrible. It gets super safe by the year 2000, and then even safer and safer. And then all of a sudden we decide we're going to stop enforcing. We being like the city of New York and Bill de Blasio, who I think is a malignant force. I actually think he's somebody who thinks that New York deserves to suffer
But
because
he's
it
a
became
commie.
too affluent. To Yeah, no, he's a bad guy. I mean,
Yeah, he's like a
didn't
literal
he?
commie.
Yeah, I know. I was going to say, I think he was with the Sandinistas for a while on like
Yeah,
some study abroad program. Like he did
right.
some, whatever. So he's a bad guy. And what they did is they just said, we're going to stop enforcing the laws. And notably to what you said about the asylums, they now like the craziest of the crazy are just let to roam the streets and, shirtless and smelling like feces in the middle of winter. And you just hope that they don't club some old lady to death with a brick. Well, guess what? Some of them do, some of them don't. And you're playing this Russian roulette game with them. So this stuff is not hard to understand. But the one thing I will say that surprised me was how many people, even when it started to bleed over into their neighborhoods and they started to feel the heat too, they kind of stuck with it, like people that, vote Democrat who believe in this stuff. They're like, okay, this is like the article that was written in it was actually during the pandemic, but it was the San Francisco Chronicle where they were calling out people who call the police for property crimes. Do you remember this, or did you see this?
No.
The article was, it is inherently racist. Isn't that interesting? Inherently
Yeah.
racist. Maybe you don't even know who's broken into your garage, but
Right.
it is inherently racist to call the police because their arrival on the scene for a property crime could result in an escalation of some kind that results in the murder of Black and brown people. So basically, if someone's breaking into your house, don't call the cops because the cops might come and shoot the burglar. And this was a
Yes.
real thing that was being
But
promoted
but
by,
here's the cuts to the core of why I'm an anarchist and I don't believe in government, because under government, that homeless person who's taking a shit in the library and using heroin there is equally under the law as me and you. They have the same rights and they have to be treated. You see them in court and the judge has to call them, Mr. Smith, and they have a DA and they're presented as if like this is just like oh, he made a mistake. I've made a mistake. Maybe I forgot to file my IRS taxes, or I ran a red light or things like that. Those are mistakes. And when you have a government where every citizen has certain rights and is treated the same, you have these externalities that are absolutely crazy. And like everyone listening has heard these stories. Someone breaks into your house, they get shot, they're paralyzed, and they sue you and
They
win.
sue you.
In
Oh
New
no, they
York,
will.
yeah, and here's the
Yeah.
other crazy thing in New York. Oh, this is what's, again, one of the reasons I'm so glad I'm not there. Squatters' rights. There was a woman in Queens in the last year, I believe. Squatters broke in her house, set up shop there. She either tried to change the locks or cut off the electricity. They arrested her.
This happened to a friend of mine in DC. The same. He's a real estate guy, a real estate owner, and he had somebody. They were in the process of rehabbing a building, and it was in a kind of transitioning neighborhood, and they're putting tons of money into it, and everyone in the community is all, oh, it's going to really upgrade the community, this kind of a thing. And while it was still being rehabbed, someone broke in, got utilities set up in their name, could prove that the utilities. So you're not even a lawful tenant, but the utility company doesn't. They're just like, okay, cool, we'll turn
How would
this
they
on.
know, right?
Yeah, exactly. And once you've done that and you've been there 30 days under DC District of Columbia law, you are a legal tenant with tenants' rights until you go through the eviction process. Anyone want to guess what the eviction process takes? 9 to 12 months, and at least $50,000 to $100,000 in legal fees for the landlord. So do you know what ends up happening? You show up with, they'll have a lawyer. People do this professionally. The squatter, will have a lawyer come and meet your lawyer before, when you're going through this whole process, and they'll say, look, give so and so. My friend who went through this said I think he paid $40,000 or $50,000 to the person and paid their rent for 6 months in the place they would actually go to up front, just to get them to leave.
Yeah, so when people tell me they're minarchists because the basic role of government is to protect property, okay, show me. It's amazing.
One thing that I think about this sometimes. I mean, it's one of the most, again, sorry, not to take us. We've kind of gone away from some of the really heavy stuff here, but you mentioned Marjorie Stoneman Douglas before. Uvalde, which is one. I mean, it's like top. I was gonna say like one of the most appalling school shootings. I mean, they're all these kind of mass shootings are demonic. By the way, there's that word again, or there's that evil, that clear evil. But it showed people something as well in terms of the government response. And Uvalde, in a very profound way, showed a lot of people, if you think that when your life is on the line, brave, well-trained men and women, but most people think of men doing this, are going to arrive and put their lives on the line for you, you may be very disappointed.
But Buck, if it was just that, we could wrap our heads around it, because it's like, I'm not putting my neck out for some kids, no matter what badge I have. They held the parents back. That's the part that makes it a whole other level.
Well, it's even worse. I mean, they were more concerned about like departmental liability than the active murder of small children, small defenseless children. And again, to the point that you made, and they were talking about before, and it was interesting, when that case happened, on my show, my radio show, we have a lot of law enforcement listeners, and they call in all the time, they write in all the time, and it was interesting. There were some people who were like, you can't judge, like you weren't there. And I was like, no, I saw the video. I can judge. I would rather be dead than be an adult with a firearm who was present that day, who did not go into that room. No question. I would rather be dead. And I would say, and this, because people like to do this thing of like the deference to those who are, it's like, calm down. Like these guys have pretty, they're given far too much deference. In the early hours after that, I thought, but it just showed people like you ultimately defending yourself, defending your family. You are the alpha and the omega, because the government, maybe at best.
Did we talk about this before, that there were 4 people who assaulted Kyle Rittenhouse? Did you know this?
4 people who
assaulted Kyle Rittenhouse that night.
Oh, Kyle Rittenhouse. Oh, yeah. Oh, no, I've seen that video. I interviewed the guy, the journalist.
Who were the 4? Do you know the 4?
I'm not sure. I mean, I remember the 2 guys that he shot. I don't remember who else was, but of the journalist who was there, I have his book here. He told me about, he was present. His video is the only reason Kyle Rittenhouse is not in prison, by the way, for the rest of his life. His video is the only reason.
He killed 2 unarmed black men. He shot off the arm of a 3rd, but he was also maced by a cop.
I didn't know that.
He went, oh yeah, he went to turn himself in after he did the job that they were there to do. When the government, which had a monopoly in security, says, "Yeah, we're not providing security today," and the cop just pepper sprayed him in his face, and that cop had zero consequences for it.
So let me tell you, I mean, it's funny because I got like some pretty solid foundational training in firearms from CIA, like foundational, like I was decent. But in recent years, as a civilian, I've actually just really decided it's like I want to get proficient at this. Like I actually
Okay,
want to be
yeah,
somebody who has a real, again, proficiency. Like not
right.
not anything beyond, but I want to be at a point where I can teach this. I can, and also I'm totally confident and comfortable with whatever guns that I have. If I have to use them in any capacity that is lawful, I can. And it's interesting because I remember when I was the NYPD and we went out for range day, and just from my pretty limited CIA training, the guys were like, "Wow, how'd you learn how to shoot like that?" And I was kind of, and at first I was like, "Well, CIA," but then I was like, "Well, but I'm an analyst. Like, what? Like, you guys are cops, right? How often do you shoot? Do you know? Do you know how many rounds most cops shoot in a given year?
No,
Less than 100.
is this? Are you serious?
Less than 100. I go to the range, I will shoot 1,000 rounds in a day pretty readily, pretty easily. Think of it like 60, 70 mags of a
Sure.
15. Like that's not even, people are like, that's really expensive. Well, radio is a good business to be in.
Right.
But most law enforcement, it's funny because people are like, I think only the cops should have guns. And this is, by the way, I'm not bragging, and I spend time with guys
Yeah,
who
yeah.
are SEALs and who are Delta, and they're like, they're like NBA players, and I'm like a good high school player, right? But most cops wouldn't even make the high school team, is my point. And people don't
Yeah.
realize that. Not
Oh yeah.
all cops. I know people know SWAT
My
guys who are like
audience
ninjas.
realizes it. I assure you.
But I mean, this is the reality, right? I mean, when you see the statistics for like the NYPD, when they actually have a live shooter, they actually have to use their service weapon. I mean, the hit ratio. Look, the Secret Service. The Secret Service opened up on the second guy who tried to hit Trump from like 15 feet away. I think fired 6 shots, missed him.
Oh yeah.
Missed him. He got away. He got away, like drove an hour and a half. If a civilian didn't, I mean, so the myth, what I'm getting at here is the mythology of like law enforcement as it's like Wyatt Earp and everything else. No, I mean, it's like public school teachers. There are some great ones, but there are a lot of bad ones. So a lot of bad ones in there too.
Hey, it's James Altucher. I've been an entrepreneur, investor, best-selling writer, stand-up comic, and whatever it is I'm interested in, I get obsessed. Yes, it's led to success, but it's also led to such heartbreaking failure. I have failed more times than I can count. I wish in my life I had had people to talk to. That's why I started the James Altucher Show and bring on some of the most brilliant minds in every area of life. People like Richard Branson, Sarah Blakely, Mark Cuban, Danica Patrick, Gary Kasparov, and I wanted to find out exactly how they've navigated the highs, the lows, and everything in between. No fluff, just raw stories and real advice. I've talked to 1,500 of the most amazing people on the planet. So if you want to learn from the best and skip the same old canned interviews, we're all about helping you find your next big idea, level up your thinking, and ultimately to choose yourself. So let's do this together. Subscribe now to the James Altucher Show.
Let's get back to the show. If you took me back 10 years and I could hear that Buck, who I think you're a by the book conservative. I think it's fair to say you kind of have traditional conservative values.
Pretty much, yeah.
That you would be saying these things, it would be like, wait a minute, Biden was president? But yeah, it's just glorious and wonderful to hear. And I have gotten, at this point, there's like no pushback from conservatives other than like elderly people when I go off on my cop rants because they saw COVID. And a lot of them will say, okay, in my town, they would never take the guns from us. And maybe they're true. I believe them. But my point is, yeah, but that sheriff's department is not going to stand up to Governor Pritzker sending in the boys from Chicago. Like, they're not going to have a standoff. So it's just, I'm gladdened that people are realizing, what law enforcement is and what it isn't. And also they're realizing, but let's talk about what we're talking about the Jordan Peterson stuff, because here's what I think is happening. So one of the things I talk about in the book, then you write, is human beings define themselves by opposition. So there's a book called The Nurture Assumption or The Nurture Myth, whatever it was. And she talks about how if you have a group of adults and kids, the kids see them as kids. But when the adults leave, the kids see themselves as boys and girls. They immediately separate out, right? So in this online right of center space, which I guess you and I would both kind of fit in if there was some kind of bubbles, as soon everyone was against progressivism, like that's something we all agreed on. That was like the premise of my book. And also being opposed to this kind of milquetoast Mike Pence, flag waving but toothless conservatism, which just has some vague social conservatism, but not really anything to it. And the Democrats have their hearts in the right place, but we disagree with them. The second that's all been defeated now, it's like, okay, now it's division. It's like, who is going to be driving the car? And you have these at least two wings, which I'm friends with everyone in them. And this has been upsetting me to no end, how personal it's been getting. But that is, I think, what's happening. Without that common foe, the second it goes away, now it's like, all right, now we're going to divide further.
Well, I think also it goes to, that there are spoils. There's spoils that are at work here that didn't used to be, and whether it's in the online space or in some of the platforms that are still out there that'll actually, have conservatives. I think, on the one hand, like my attitude in this business has been, and it has always been, and I think anybody who's worked with me or spent time around me would attest to this. So I don't think it's just like my view of it because, yay me. Is I just feel like, you do the best content you can in as many places as you can, and you serve the audience, and you just kind of let the chips fall where they may, because you're going to get screwed over for things you should get. Maybe you'll get lucky and get a few opportunities that like you actually didn't really deserve more than the other guy. It's not fair. One of the best things I was ever told by somebody who's a long time, he had been at Fox, had gotten fired, producer, not on air, but we were working together on something. This is like early in my career. And because I said something like, I was like, wait, like that guy, like, that's not fair. And he just kind of looked at me. He was like, son, fair? He's like, there's nothing fair about being able to show up and speak your mind and get paid. And like, maybe you get paid a lot or maybe you get paid a little, but like, you just got to love what you're doing and roll with it and take it. Like it's not about fair.
There was a college professor I didn't have, my friend had, a business teacher, and he had the whiteboard and he wrote fair on one half of it, unfair on the other. And he called on people, all right, what do I put? Fair, here's some things. Unfair, okay. And after everyone had their lists, he just crossed them out and he goes, I like it, I don't like it. Like that's just what that word means.
Yeah, pretty much. Right. I mean, what's fair is what benefits me. What's unfair is what benefits the guy I don't like.
Right.
So, I think that there's a little bit of like of both the kids are like the dean is not around anymore because you can build your own pirate ship and it can be really big and really successful. I mean, you're an example of somebody who's gone more that route. Although, you were a mainstay on Fox, on Kennedy's show, et cetera, for many years too. Right. So it's like, we have all sort of done a little bit of this, a little bit of that. But I think that now there's also a sense that on the right, we're not just the opposition and we're like this team that's working against the other side, steamrolling us and destroying the country. I mean, that's still there. But now it's like, oh my God, like we're like culturally ascendant too. Like we're actually in a lot of ways the cool kids, because I don't even care about like some Hollywood celebrity endorsing or liking my show. Like that's crap. Like it means nothing. That those people to me are all morons, right? So it's not even, and the other conservatives feel that way. But so we're now, we're having to get used to the new reality, which in many ways I think is something conservatives sought after for a long time. But we are more influential, we are more ascendant, and this is where that term gets thrown around so much. And I'm sure you see this just everywhere. People use the term grifter. It's all, by the way, it's fair, unfair. People just, if someone doesn't like somebody else, the first on the right, I feel like the first thing they go to is he's a grifter.
By the way, hold on though. There are lots of people you and I know in this space, and I can't think of names off my head, who are just repeating the talking points and red meat to the audience, who don't have any principles of their own. And there are some.
Well,
grifters.
they may be a simpleton, but like, are they a grifter? Do you
Yes.
know? You
Yes,
know,
they're grifters.
if they are saying things that they fundamentally don't believe in to hoodwink the audience,
Right.
then I think that's applicable. I'm not saying there are no grifters. I'm just saying everybody calls everybody they don't like a grifter.
No. So you don't understand. There's a hierarchy. So after grifter, if you get successful enough, you're controlled opposition.
Oh, that's right. That's
So
right.
I think you and I are still grifters. Like we haven't.
All right, we're still grifter style. Okay.
But Jordan
all right,
is controlled opposition.
Jordan is controlled opposition. Yeah. So yeah, no, there's a
because you know why? Because if this person was really being honest, they would agree with me. So clearly, and they're too successful to just be grifting, because at that point money's lost its utility. So someone has to have them by the short hairs.
Yeah, no, there's that. I also think there's a little bit of how do I put this? One thing that I'm shocked by is how willing people are to start listening to people who were wrong about everything until about 5 minutes ago. This has been something that I'm really having a tough time with. Like, you and I can sit here and, I've like, I don't like the term evolve. Like, I've just learned more about some things or seen more. I've taken in new evidence and maybe shifted a little bit on this or that, but I've been conservative fundamentally since I was probably 15 or 16 years old without changing my worldview in any substantial way. I mean, the way that I'm not, like some of the I like the All In podcast guys, they do a pretty good show. I like them. I've met them. But the guy Chamath, for example, who everything he says now is great, and or not everything, but a lot of things he says is great. But I listen to him and I'm like, how the hell did you vote for Biden in 2020? Like, where were you? Like, how did this happen? And, maybe he's totally red-pilled and authentic, and I'm not judging him specifically. I don't know the guy, I never met him. But I just feel like we've let in all these people who were like on the wrong side until a minute ago. And I have all these people who are conservatives who are like, yeah, I mean, I think RFK Jr. is one of them, by the way. RFK, that I will talk about more openly. People love on the right. They love RFK Jr.
I have publicly said that I think I think I've publicly said many times I think he's a sociopath, and I don't know that with a high degree of certainty, but I would stand by that statement. But I don't think he's pretending to be a conservative.
He's not pretending to be a conservative. My point is that he is accepted by conservatives much more broadly than I think he should be. Because he's now good on one thing.
But that's the only thing he's trying to do.
Yeah, I don't know if it's the only thing he's trying
to do. Well, hold on. Let me defend this a little bit, even despite me not having a high degree of confidence in his moral character, given that he's a Kennedy. I'm gladdened, and I'm sure you're confident you'll agree, that this Mitt Romney Chamber of Commerce veneration that conservatives used to have until maybe 15 years ago, like that Mike Pence school, is gone. There is an enormous, this historically until 15 years ago was exclusively the far left, innate distrust of big corporations. That is something that has come part of conservatism, certainly since COVID. So I think a lot of conservatives, he speaks to them in that regard, because when he's talking about like giant food conglomerates and all these other companies, 15 years ago, it's like, okay, go to Whole Foods, hippie. Now it's like, wait, we saw what these people can do. You're kind of speaking our language.
Well, I agree with your broad point. I would say this about the corporatism issue.
Yeah.
Republicans used to think of corporatism as a branch of capitalism that, we're going to have GE and we're going to have IBM, and our companies are great, and the great American companies are the heartbeat of the American economy. And what they found out really in the Obama era is that these are actually arms of the cathedral. Yes. These have now been taken over internally, usually through the HR department, and then it sort of spreads, like it metastasizes from the HR department. To run the whole company, by the way, right? Because HR picks the CEO picks the senior level. Like people just think, oh, HR. No, HR is the gatekeeper, right? That's the whole thing. And they use wokeness and DEI and all this. But companies became the enforcement arm. Even in a way beyond, I think, the media in a lot of ways, right? Like it's one thing it's one thing to turn on CBS Evening News and be like, these guys are jackasses. It's another thing when your company's like, where's the signature in the pronouns rather in your signature? What's the problem?
But here's another example. When leftists nowadays try to gaslight people and they say there were no vaccine mandates, they're being factual but not truthful. Like these were all these giant companies which said, if you don't get a vaccine, which legally that's your right, you're fired. So they weren't mandates from the state, but it was much more effective. I tweeted out that capitalism is so much more effective than communism, that corporate America has implemented Maoism far better than the CCP could ever dream of. When you have people on a group call going one by one saying, I'm a racist, that's a struggle session, like textbook.
Yes. No, absolutely. So I think that my point is merely that the corporatism issue, it was a learned experience, or I guess just an experience that the right had of, oh my God, what we thought corporate America was, because the left had been telling us the whole time they were taking over, which, it's actually very Mao in terms of, does he need to pretend that he's working with the nationalists against the Japanese invasion? And does he have to, play this game for a little while until he's powerful enough? That's essentially what they did inside of the corporations. They said, oh no, big Wall Street. I mean, the lie that Wall Street is Republican is hilarious. I mean, anyone who spent any time with like hedge fund directors, these guys are libs. They loved Hillary. They're writing huge checks to the Clinton Foundation.
Sure.
Hedge funds, which really are the dominant, certainly the dominant donors on Wall Street, and the big banks, Goldman Sachs. These are Democrat enclaves, but they managed to convince everybody, including people on the right, like while they're taking it over and while they're calling the shots, they're like, oh, you guys with your Wall Street fat cats on the Republican side.
Because they're culturally very Republican. When you think of a Republican from like an 80s movie, it's the Goldman Sachs guy. So that's the kind of, there's a logic to it.
Yeah. No, a lot of them in the 80s movies look like me, but that's actually not, not really where they are anymore. It's a lot of diversity, equity, and inclusion hiring going on at Goldman in these places. So,
and a lot of white guilt, or performative white guilt, I should say. Folks, head over to malice.locals.com. We're buck to questions from the fans. Folks, we're running out of time, and congrats again for being such a great dad. What has been your favorite part of this interview?
You haven't made fun of my head once, which is no, you know what? I'm actually a little sad. I actually, but your producer did before we started, to be fair. So he did get in that my head is so big that he can't adjust it for the shot, which is fair and true. But no, man, I mean, I always I will tell you this. I get very rarely a chance to have unstructured conversations with anybody. I have because of the nature of radio, the nature of cable news, the nature of most of the mediums that I am regularly on, it's like I'm always on this clock, and I always have a topic, and I have to. It's more like declamation, which is like what we used to do, speech and debate, right, in high school.
Yeah.
It's more like, just getting into what I need to get into. And I don't get to do this, which is actually just have a conversation with a friend, which is actually really fun, which is why we've gone like way over. And like, I'm not like, I need to go. And, I don't really get to talk to people to just talk to them in our business. It's always like, you've got 5 minutes, go.
You are welcome.
Pluto TV has all the shows and movies you love streaming for free. That means laughter is free with gut-busting comedies like The Neighborhood, Boomerang, and Ferris Bueller's Day Off.
Bueller.
Mystery is free with countless cases to crack from Criminal Minds, Tracker, and Matlock.
I'm a lawyer, like the old TV show.
And thrills are free with heart-pumping hits like The Walking Dead and Pulp Fiction.
Correctamundo.
Feel the free Pluto TV. Stream now, pay never.